Marriage after baby. Why it gets hard, and what actually helps. A parenting guide from Creative Minds Montessori. Almost every couple takes a hit after a baby. In the landmark longitudinal research, about 2/3 of new mothers reported a decline in relationship satisfaction, and for nearly half of them the drop didn't arrive until around the 1-year mark, not the newborn fog. It's usually logistics, not love, sleep loss, an unfair and often invisible division of labor, fading intimacy, and phones taking the few minutes left over. The third who don't decline aren't luckier. They went through it as a team, kept the friendship alive, and fought better. And for your children, what matters isn't whether you argue. It's whether they see the repair. One couple who described themselves as people who never fought came close to divorce in the first 2 years. Their own diagnosis wasn't a character flaw, 2 full-time jobs plus full-time childcare with no outside help at all. A mother about 7 months postpartum said her resentment was growing sky-high, she was burnt out and felt invisible, while her husband exercised every morning and socialized most evenings. When she posted about it, the most common reply from other mothers wasn't shock. It was recognition. Another couple simply stopped being a couple, conversations narrowed to schedules and supplies, one took mornings and one took evenings, so there was almost no overlap where both were awake, off-duty, and facing each other. And a new father described the version nobody warns men about, standing slightly outside the mother-baby unit, unsure how to soothe or feed or help, feeling excluded and faintly useless, while his wife had no idea he felt shut out and would have welcomed him stepping in. But here's the part the internet underreports. Many of those same parents said that somewhere around 6 to 12 months, sleep returned, routines solidified, and the relationship deepened, a sense of doing this life together they hadn't had before. The dip is close to universal. The permanence isn't. The number worth knowing comes from a landmark study that followed 130 newlywed couples from before pregnancy through the first 3 years of parenthood. About a third of new mothers held steady or improved, and roughly 67% reported a decline in marital satisfaction. 2 details matter more than the headline. First, the first-year drop was steeper and more sudden than any other life transition that lab had measured. Second, and this is the one that catches couples off guard, the dip is often delayed. Nearly half the mothers whose satisfaction declined didn't feel it until about a year after birth. So we're doing fine at 8 weeks is not evidence you're in the clear. It may just be early. Underneath the statistic, the same handful of drivers show up everywhere. First, bandwidth collapse. Sleep, time and energy all go to keeping a small human alive, and attention that used to flow between 2 adults now flows in one direction. Nobody decided this, it's arithmetic. Second, uneven labor, and then a scoreboard. One partner does more of the childcare and housework and feels exhausted and unappreciated, the other feels perpetually criticized. Scorekeeping is the engine of the whole thing, and once it starts it's very hard to stop, because both people have accurate ledgers of their own contributions and incomplete ones of the others. Third, the mental load. Not the doing but the remembering. Who tracks the pediatrician appointment, who notices the diapers running low, who holds the entire operating system in their head. And here's the crucial nuance, it's the perception of unfairness, more than the raw hours, that damages the relationship. That resentment doesn't stay in the marriage either. It bleeds into parenting and into the primary caregiver's relationship with the children. Fourth, intimacy fades and gets misread, sexual interest commonly drops for new mothers, and the partner frequently experiences it as personal rejection, which adds a second problem on top of the first. And fifth, the partner who feels shut out withdraws, and the distance grows. And here's the reframe that does the most work. Most fights after a baby are downstream of logistics and visibility, not values. You are not 2 people who suddenly want different lives. You are 2 exhausted people negotiating an unfamiliar workload with no handbook, at 3 in the morning, while being judged on it. Relationship science describes the transition to parenthood as one of the most joyful and most stressful periods couples ever face. Abrupt role changes, fatigue, financial strain, work-family conflict, a sharp drop in shared fun, and a rise in conflict. That's a near-universal pattern, which means every generation of parents met some version of it. What changed is the support around it. Partner, family and friend support measurably buffers the strain, and a strained partner relationship after birth intensifies the risk of postnatal depression for both parents in the first year. Fewer nearby adults means fewer buffers, and the loss lands directly on the couple. The genuinely new pressure has the strongest data of anything in this guide: phones. In a survey of about 2,000 married Americans, 37% said their spouse is often on the phone when they'd rather connect. Couples with that phone problem were about 70% less likely to be very happy in their marriage, controlling for demographics, and their odds of foreseeing divorce were 4 times higher. 21% of people with phone-distracted spouses were unhappy in the marriage, versus 8% of those without. Researchers call the mechanism technofrence, technology interrupting face-to-face interaction, and it leaves the other person feeling ignored and pushed away. The scroll isn't stealing hours. It's stealing the specific minutes you had left for each other. Where tech genuinely helps: shared calendars, mental load apps, a check-in text, and telehealth therapy you can actually attend after bedtime. 3 common fixes, honestly. The first: divide the chores clearly, make the list, define the lanes. It kills silent assumptions, interrupts the scorekeeping spiral, and gives each person a known domain. But it requires having the hard conversation first, and life refuses to hold still. A sleep regression, an illness, a schedule change, and the deal goes stale. And worse, you can split every task and still leave one person as the manager of all of them, which is the invisible load surviving intact under a fair-looking chore chart. The second: schedule a date night. It reconnects you to the affection underneath the logistics, and remembering you like each other is not a small thing. But with a young baby it's a logistical project: sitter, cost, timing, and by the time you're finally sitting across a table you may be too depleted to be present. The third: self-care, making sure each parent gets a break. It prevents the burnout that drives most of the snapping. But it only works if it's mutual. If there's no second set of hands, one parent's break is the other parent's extra shift, which manufactures resentment rather than curing it. And the logic that backfires hardest: I earn more, so my time off is more earned. Using an earnings gap to justify offloading unpaid labor is one of the most reliable resentment generators there is. Tendencies, not rules, and the most useful finding here is about expectations rather than gender. In heterosexual couples the common pattern is an expectation gap. Mothers end up doing more baby care than they anticipated, and fathers less. And it's that mismatch, not the raw split, that predicts lower postpartum relationship quality. The contrast case makes the point beautifully. Lesbian couples tend to share childcare more equally and report higher satisfaction with the arrangement, and critically, their expectations matched reality. For them, doing more baby care than anticipated was not linked to worse relationship quality. So the corrosive ingredient isn't the labor. It's the gap between what you were braced for and what arrived. Which is genuinely good news, because expectations are far more adjustable than infants. The tendencies on each side: the primary caregiver carries recovery, often feeding, and the manager role, and is likelier to feel unseen, touched out and resentful. The other partner is likelier to feel excluded and uncertain of their role, and to withdraw into work rather than say so. Paternal and partner postnatal depression is real and under-recognized. Single parents have no one to divide with, so the strain shows up as pure overload, and the buffer has to be built deliberately from family, friends, and childcare. Turning difference into teamwork works best when you trade whole domains rather than tasks. The manager hands over an entire area, bedtime or medical or food, so the other person owns the thinking and not just the doing. And the excluded partner needs solo time with the baby to build genuine competence, because nobody becomes a capable parent while being supervised. 3 things hold up under the evidence. Small daily warmth. a fair split of the invisible load. And a way of fighting that doesn't do damage. The first method, daily microconnection. Small moments, not grand gestures. The mechanism is the same one that builds a child's secure attachment. Connection is rebuilt through many tiny attuned moments, not occasional large events. This matters practically, because grand gestures require resources new parents don't have, while micro moments require about 90 seconds. So, a real hug or kiss at hello and goodbye, 6 seconds, long enough to register as contact rather than a formality. And one specific appreciation named out loud each day, because stress drives negativity bias and specificity cuts through it. Thank you for handling the 5 a.m. so I could sleep beats, thanks for everything. Then one phones down check-in daily, a few minutes of asking about their actual world with no agenda to fix anything. And one protected recurring ritual, morning coffee before the house wakes, a walk after bedtime, something the week can be relied on to contain. Roughly 15 minutes a day is the ballpark the research points at. This works at every stage, and for toddlers and preschoolers there's a bonus. Children like seeing their parents be warm to each other. It reads as safety. Frame it so the child is included rather than displaced. Expect it to feel slightly artificial for a week or two. The saboteur is skipping it on the bad days, which is exactly when the deposit counts most. And one honest limit, microconnection can't dissolve resentment that's already hardened. It keeps new resentment from forming while you deal with the old. The second method goes straight at the resentment engine. Divide the invisible load, and own domains rather than tasks. What damages relationships is the perception of unfairness, and a fair split protects more than the marriage. It protects the primary caregiver's parenting and their bond with the children. The distinction that makes it work is helper versus owner. A helper does tasks when asked, an owner holds the thinking, the tracking, and the consequences. So make the list twice. First the chores, then the thinking behind each. Who remembers the well visit, who notices the diapers running low, who knows which shoes still fit. Then assign whole domains, end to end, including remembering they exist. Add a standing weekly check-in of 10 or 15 minutes, because the deal will go stale. 2 rules decide whether this works. First, have the conversation calm, never mid-argument. Done while flooded, it becomes the fight instead of the fix. Second, the saboteur is the audit, turning the domain handoff into supervision, correcting how your partner does the thing you handed over. If you own it, you own the method too, or it isn't a handoff. Revisit the split deliberately after any big change, a return to work, a new sleep regression, a second child. And for preschoolers, make part of it visible and positive with a simple family jobs routine, so the child sees both parents contributing without being exposed to the negotiation. The third method is what actually distinguished the couples who didn't decline. They went through the transition as a team, kept a strong underlying friendship, and handled conflict constructively, raising issues gently and genuinely taking the other person's input seriously. Notably, they were not the couples with easier babies, more money, or family nearby. It's skill and orientation, not circumstance. So open hard topics softly. I'm drowning in the mornings. Can we look at it together, rather than an accusation, because a criticism opening predicts the entire shape of what follows. And frame it as us versus the problem. The problem is the mornings, not your partner. Then say fondness and admiration out loud regularly, in the ordinary run of a week, not only during repair. And actually accept influence, take the suggestion, try the thing, let them change your mind sometimes. It helps enormously to remember what you're really arguing about. A postpartum informed frame treats these as logistics and visibility problems, which lowers the threat considerably compared with believing you've discovered an incompatibility. Keep sharp conflict out of the child's earshot, and let them see the repair and the warmth, which is the part that teaches them something. The honest limitation, these are skills, and skills are hardest to run on 4 hours of sleep. If the pattern is entrenched, a good therapist is a shortcut, not a failure. Children are exquisitely tuned to the emotional climate between their caregivers, well before they have language for it. What they register isn't the content of an argument, it's the weather. Chronic unresolved conflict undermines a child's felt sense of security and can weaken the parent-child attachment itself. The mechanisms are specific. Parents in high-conflict relationships tend to parent worse, with more criticism and shouting, so the child gets less warmth and more fear at once. Children also try to make sense of conflict they can't understand and frequently land on themselves as the cause. But the harm is tied to conflict that is frequent, intense and unresolved, not to ordinary disagreement that gets repaired. Children who witness conflict and resolution learn something valuable, that relationships can bend without breaking. And there's a flip side that's rarely mentioned. In a population-based cohort of over 1,000 families, paternal relationship satisfaction at 8 weeks significantly predicted infant personal social development at 14 months, with the endearment and communication dimensions most predictive. The pathway ran through the father's own postnatal depression, control for that and the effect disappeared, which tells you what's actually load-bearing. A father who feels connected and undepressed shows up in his baby's social development. Supporting the couple is supporting the child. You don't need a conflict-free marriage. You need a repairing one. Childcare shows up in this topic in a way parents rarely anticipate, as relationship infrastructure. Reliable, quality care measurably improves parent mental health and reduces stress. 88% of parents said dependable quality care would improve their mental health, while about half described finding care as nearly impossible and a major stressor in itself. The chain is short and real. A less stressed parent is a more present parent, and 2 more present parents have fewer 6 p.m. skirmishes. Several parents in the stories above said plainly that their relationship got breathing room specifically once their child started daycare. The time and energy for each other came back. A good program also brings cross-context consistency, the same routines and expectations at home and school, plus trained observation during hours you can't see. A weak program adds a third source of friction on top of the one you already have: mismatched approaches, thin one-directional communication, turnover high enough that you re-explain your child every few months, and staff who wave off concerns. So run the communication 3 ways. You give the center enough context to help, and you don't owe anyone your marriage's details. We've had a hard few weeks and he may be more clingy is useful and entirely sufficient. The center gives you specific observations, how your child ate, slept, played, handled transitions. And the child hears the same simple language from every trusted adult, so they feel held by one aligned team rather than pulled between 2. This is not medical advice. Most of what's here is the ordinary, brutal transition, and it improves. Some things need a professional. Postpartum depression and anxiety in either parent, persistent low mood, hopelessness, rage, numbness or anxiety lasting beyond about 2 weeks, or interfering with functioning, warrants a call. Paternal and partner postnatal depression is real and under-recognized. In the U.S., the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available around the clock, and Postpartum Support International is 1-800-944-4773. Any thought of harming yourself or your baby is an emergency. Call 988 or 911 now. A persistently hostile or distant relationship is itself a flag, because it raises depression risk for both parents. Seek therapy earlier than you think, before resentment hardens. And any intimidation, threat or physical aggression is a safety issue, not a communication issue. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. No formula fits every couple. Even the strongest evidence here is about odds, and the most encouraging finding in it is that the third of couples who came through without decline weren't handed easier circumstances. No calmer babies, no more money, no grandparents down the street. They treated it as a team, protected the friendship, and fought better. That's learnable, which means the statistic isn't a prophecy. The same-sex couple data is the quiet proof that there's no biological law assigning the load to one person. The corrosive ingredient is unfair and unmet expectations, and expectations are changeable in a way almost nothing else about a newborn is. So be on the same team, keep some warmth in the ordinary days, make the invisible work visible, and ask for help early, because asking early is a strength, not an admission. And remember what parents on the far side keep reporting. For most couples, this is the hardest chapter, not the whole book. For the full guide, and more parenting resources, visit creativemindsmontessori.com/parenting.